Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. I'm your host. My name is Shane. I do college stuff. I teach history stuff, sociology stuff, traveler, digger in the dirt, all of these fun things. Hope everybody's doing well. Greetings on this fine Thursday. I don't know what it's like where you are today, but in my neck of the woods, it has been, I don't know, like an average Irish day. It's very cold. It's rainy. The average humidity is pretty high, and it's very overcast. So, yeah. So, hey, Eris, man, I totally feel grading papers. Dude, I was so snowed under last week. I got completely just swamped with stuff. If Rome didn't exist, how could it convert to Christianity? You know, that's a fair question. But what's really crazy is that for the Spanish Inquisition to have existed, Rome would have had to have converted to Christianity. Otherwise, Spain would have probably been, I don't know, still polytheistic. So it's crazy how that works. Is that your cyclical logic is kind of jacked up there. Also, what's up with the hair? I mean, not trying to be ad hominem, but for real, I don't know. Hey, Kyle, good to see you. Hey, Metrand, good morning. Hope that things are well in your northernly neck of the woods. Cold and rainy here as well. Yeah, I don't know what's up with the weather. It was supposed to be sort of partly cloudy and in the 70s today, but it ended up not being that at all. It got warm here, 1 degree. Woo! Better than -17 the other day. Good gracious. How far are you from the Arctic Circle in your particular area? You don't have to tell us like what specific city you live in. I don't want to dox you, but like if you could give us a general, like I am this far away. Yeah. So Metrand, without giving too much away, lives in the sort of northern part of Scandinavia. So it gets kind of chilly up there. So hello everybody, welcome to the show. This is Adventures in History, where we talk about history stuff, we goof off, we have a good time, we make bad jokes, we poke fun at history, we try to make sense out of stuff that happened. And on tonight's episode, we are going to talk about conversion. And here I'm not talking about like conversion therapy, even though that just got outlawed in Canada. Good job, Canadians. We're talking here about the conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity. I actually mentioned this as tonight's topic in another chat room. And a chatter, possibly sarcastically, said, "Isn't that just a one-sentence stream? Rome converted to Christianity. See you next week." And it might seem like that's the thing. But what I sort of hope to show you all tonight is that this was one of, if not the most bizarre historical occurrences in world history. And very rarely has such a bizarre event in world history had such a lasting impact on world history. If you think of all of the things that have been done in the name of the Catholic Church, all of those crusades we've been talking about on viewer request streams, all of the colonization done in the name of the Christian Church. So you're quite a distance. Oh, you're 2,000 miles from the North Pole. Oh, wow. That's not as far as it sounds. That's still pretty cold there, Metrand. Yeah, so think of all of the things that have related to Christianity or have been somehow tied into Christianity, and then imagine that none of that existed. And imagine how different the world would look. It would be a dramatically different world. A dramatically different world. So this particular situation is one that was not a destined sort of thing. It was not something that had a guaranteed success rate of 100%. This was sort of like the Detroit Lions winning the Super Bowl next year after they've won one game this year, right? It's just not something that a lot of people would have expected or bet on. It's really kind of an underdog story. We'd all have jetpacks by now. I don't know. I don't actually know. I suspect that not to be the case. If you look at how the Industrial Revolution started in Europe, the stability of those countries in Europe that gave them the wherewithal to do all of that stuff with the Industrial Revolution was in part due to the fact that there was the stabilizing factor of the Roman Catholic Church for about 1,500 years in their country's history. Because in a lot of the periods of time, especially after Rome in the West collapses, the only thing that's really keeping order and trying to keep people from just wholesale slaughtering each other and trying to convince people to settle down and make actual countries is the Roman Catholic Church, especially the people that are the popes. So would Europe even be the dominant cultural and economic spot that it is today? Perhaps Africa would be a higher spot. I doubt that their colonization efforts from Europe would have been... Anyway, we could play this what-if game forever. But this is a really big deal. And to sort of kick this thing off, one of the things that I wanted to do a little bit was actually talk about Roman religion and how important it was to the Roman people. So if you remember, or if you've been around for any of the previous streams where we've talked about Rome, you'll know that Rome was a very, very religious group of people. They took this stuff very seriously. Sometimes it's kind of easy for us as modern people to look back at historical people and go, yeah, they knew that all that stuff was garbage, right? They didn't really believe in all of these weird stories and stuff. But they did. There were clearly a few people that were what we might consider super big intellectuals that had some questions about the relationship between divine and human worlds. But overall, these people were incredibly religious, and Rome especially took religion very, very seriously. There was a concept inside of the Roman world called Pax Deorum. And this is a Latin phrase that means peace of the gods. And they very firmly believed that the only way for Rome to prosper was for the Romans to keep the peace with the gods. And to do so, they had to follow all of the proper rituals. They had to make sure that they kept all of the proper tenets and festival days and holidays. There are examples in Roman history where there were these big religious holidays which were all dedicated to individual gods. But we have sources where, in multiple occasions, where they found out sort of halfway through a multiple day festival that somebody had not done something properly in the order of procession on the first day. So they started the entire multiple day holiday over again because they had to do it the right way. Otherwise, the gods would become very angry and they would break the peace of the gods, and the gods would then punish Rome. These people are very, very serious about their religion. When the Republic starts falling, one of the things that is used as a tool by the dictators, people like Cassius, people like Sulla, people like Caesar, one of the things that these people use to gain political authority is taking over religious office. When Augustus became the first emperor, one of the things that he really sought after was this title called Pontifex Maximus, which is the Great Bridge, that was sort of the highest priest inside of the Roman world, because that was considered to be an incredibly important position inside of their larger religious concepts, right? Hey, Amy, good to see you. How are you? So there are lots of instances where I could point out along the way about how important Roman religion was. And it wasn't even just necessarily like the really big religious festivals. Sometimes it was just the very basic stuff. There's a particular instance where a Roman naval captain is going off to fight this particular battle, and he has with him some sacred chickens and basically a reader of the augurs, these people that can sort of read the signs and predict the future. And he doesn't get a good prediction of the battle, and so he throws the sacred chickens overboard. And the Roman historians, when they write about his inevitable failure at the subsequent battle, they say he didn't lose because he wasn't smart. He lost because he ticked off the gods. Like, these people really, really did think that this was a big deal. Hey, boss, we can't come to the job just yet. We got to redo this religious thing because Josh forgot to do that thing. Yes, the 37th time, but we got to redo these days. Right? But the sacred chickens. Hey, Edge Kelly, good to see you. Right? So they took this stuff very, very seriously. Right? And I could do an entire stream just on Roman religion, because it really, and I've actually taught classes like at the 400 level that were on Roman religion. So I know a lot about this stuff. Speaking of the sacred chicken, you want to call the puppy up. Let me call the puppy. She might not have the chicken, but we'll see. Here she comes. Oh, and she does have the chicken. Come and see me. Come and see me. Come here. Here. Come here. Let's put the chicken up here. And that way you can come and get it. Come here. Come and see me. Come on. Come on. Come on. Oh, there's the puppy. Hello. Hello, Miss Puppy Poo. Your fans love you. Oh my goodness gracious. So many sugars. You want to look right here? You look right here? You want to put the chicken up here? No, come here. Come on. Come on. Where are you? Come here. Come here. Hey, where are you going? Do you want to come over here? Okay, come over here. Come and see me. Come and see me. Come on. There we go. Hiya, Snoopy. Oh, I just want the chicken. Want the chicken? Arr. Arr. No, you just want me to give you the chicken? Okay, there you go. Oh, it's a raid! Bum ba da bum. Did I miss an entire raid? Or are we just coming in? Hello, Paladin. How are you? Thank you for the follow. Good to see you. We've got Mega Moon, Cupcake Tattooed. We've got Oogie Boogie with us. Felix Felicius, I hope you're feeling lucky tonight. So many great NPC death. That's great. It's a secret raid. Secret raid. You couldn't actually raid. You got follow botted. Oh no! Oh no! That is horrible. Cupcake, I apologize. Well, I mean, I can't really do anything myself about apologies, but that sucks. Follow bots are horrible things, and the people that run them are people that have way too much time on their hands and should do something else. So I take it, Cupcake, that you might have been sent here because we are also participating in the 12 days of streaming scenario. And if so, I will remind everybody that we are running a charity stream, and tonight is my last stream in our charity drive. We are collecting funds for Starlight Children Foundation, who try to take care of kids that are in the hospital, especially kids that have been in the hospital for a long time, by trying to get them something to have fun with, some entertainment, some board games or card games or video games, something to help them pass the time and feel a little bit more like a kid, even though they are in less than ideal situations. So if you want to and you are able to, you can click that magic little link right there and give Cupcake a follow, who just came in, and then below that you can see the direct donation link. We're almost there. We are 120 of $200 for our goal, so if you have the financial ability to do so, go for it. If not, maybe share the stream, give us a host, maybe bring some more eyeballs in this direction. NPC Death, thanks for the follow, and I hope that you have a beautiful lurk. Cupcake, what were you up to on stream? Let me see if I made sure that I said hello to everybody. Paladin, I am well. You came in when we were summoning the Puppy of War, who is my dog Kaylee. She's a giant mess, and she's sort of like the stream mascot. Raids, secret raids. Raid botted. Cupcake got follow botted. Yeah, it's a mess. You're a history fan. What are we covering tonight? We are covering the conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity, which is a weird little moment in history where lots of crazy stuff happens and the stars kind of align, and then the entire Roman world decide, well, not the entire Roman world, but a lot of people in the Roman world decide, you know what, this polytheism that we've done for about the last 1,400 years, not really so much what we want to do anymore. You were Fortniting. Awesome. I've never played Fork Knife. Constantine Milvian Bridge. Oh, yeah. So we actually talked about Constantine sort of in his total world last Thursday night. So for those of you who don't know, hello, my name is Shane. I am a college teacher. I have lots of fancy pieces of paper and stuff like history and sociology. But the show here is Adventures in History, and we are actually tackling history in chronological order. We started when humans weren't even humans, and we have made it all the way up to the 4th century, which is the years between 300 and 400 of our current era. And we do things kind of regionally speaking instead of trying to do 1 year at a time, because it's just a lot easier to keep up with a narrative. And so tonight we are talking about this really weird event that happened over here in Europe at this time, where Rome just decided to convert to Christianity, and we're sort of trying to explain why such a thing was able to happen and how a group of people that were so devoted to their polytheistic religion decided to just abandon it all and go for monotheism. So we started off tonight by talking a little bit about sort of what Roman religion was and how important it was to them. And then we're going to sort of transition now into some stuff that was happening a little bit closer to the time period that we're talking. So if we're looking specifically at this period of time from about 300 to 400, what we see inside of the Roman world is this big movement towards syncretism. This has been something that Rome had done for 1,000 plus years. And the idea behind syncretism is that when Rome encountered new deities, it would go conquer somebody and it would run into their local gods. Sometimes their gods that the Romans had, were sort of the preferred ones, but sometimes some of these pagan gods, or some of these, foreign gods, became very interesting. Maybe they were kind of neato. They had some kind of weird little cultic following thing that sort of made the Romans go, hey, that seems kind of vogue and chic. And with syncretism, what would happen is that Rome would basically co-opt these other people's gods. And we have examples of this going all the way back to when Rome was not even really a republic yet. It was still being under the kings, I guess the actual invocation of the Magna Mater was after the kingdom period, but in a very early Roman Republic, they actually had this big religious ritual to basically steal the Etruscans' main god, the Magna Mater, or Great Mother. And they did this thing called an invocation where they basically invited the Magna Mater to forsake the Etruscans and take up the Romans as her official protectorate. So the Romans were big on this stuff, and they really liked these foreign gods. But one of the things that was particularly interesting around this time were a group of gods that started taking on different aspects. So an aspect is sort of like an avatar, if you're familiar with the way that Hinduism works, where you have one god that can show up as multiple different gods. Here, I don't mean like the, Ong, yip kind of avatar. This is more along the way of having one god or goddess that has lots of different ways that they appear. And Zeus had probably a half dozen, but I actually have some photographs that I can show you. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, when I show pictures of things that I have seen or places that I have been, I get to wear the adventure hat. The adventure hat is the hat that I wear when I go on adventures. I travel as much as I can, and I've been to quite a few places sort of around the world, and you can get to spam that lovely adventure hat emote there in the chat when the adventure hat pops up. So let's look at some photos of Artemis. So everybody probably, when I say Artemis, thinks of Artemis kind of like this, right? Artemis is a huntress. She has her little quiver of arrows here. She is pictured with a deer. And this is sort of your traditional Roman Artemis. The good old-fashioned huntress of the moon kind of stuff. But there is another aspect of Artemis. This, by the way, this particular statue, if you want to go see it, is in the Louvre in Paris. It's not too far away from the Venus de Milo, one of the more famous statuary pieces that's in the Louvre. But this is a really great statue of Artemis here in sort of her traditional good old-fashioned Roman form. But as the cult of Artemis moves further, especially east, and it gets over to places like modern-day Turkey, what the Romans would have called Anatolia or Cappadocia or Pontia, Artemis starts looking a little bit different. And before we get here, let me remind everybody that statuary is very old and hard to find, and sometimes it loses pieces. So the Artemis that I'm about to show you does not have a head or arms, but you're going to be able to see a pretty stark difference just right off the bat. So this is another image of Artemis, and it would have had a head that would have been a much older looking woman. The hands here would have just sort of come out in sort of a kind of a welcoming, holding sort of description. But this particular version of Artemis is an aspect of Artemis as the Great Mother Artemis. And this was another sort of aspect of Artemis that was very popular, especially in the East. And Artemis, as this idea of a Great Mother, had a big following in places like Ephesus and the big cities that you might have known of, like Iconium or Nicomedia, these big cities that are over in what we call today Turkey. This particular statue, by the way, is in the sort of special room of statuary at a city in Jordan called Gadara. Jordan, of course, being further in the east where this particular Great Mother, Artemis, was popular. This is not on public display. I got in basically because we had a group of students, and the guy that was running the site at Gadara recognized that we were teachers and had students and was like, oh, let me show you the good stuff. And then we got to go in this little secret back room where they had a lot of this great statuary. So how many years apart were those statues made? That's a great question. I don't actually know the answer to it. If I had to date this particular statue, this would have probably been around the 1st or 2nd century of our current era. So probably somewhere before about 300 or so. At that point, Gadara was a very, very big city, part of a group called the Decapolis that was not directly under Roman control until Trajan sort of wrecked the entire world. But Gadara was a big city that had a lot of stuff. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, here we have Artemis as this great huntress in her sort of, we're going to go hunting toga. Here we see Artemis in this big dress with all of these decorations. Now, these things here, if she were not wearing a dress, would be very bad for Twitch TOS, because as the great mother of Artemis, these were all breasts. So, as a great mother here, she is feeding all of her children, and she has dozens of breasts. So, this is clearly not the same kind of Artemis that we have here, in mammary glands alone. But the idea here is that Steve is raiding. Is that not why you are here? Steve Sketches. Thank you so much, my friend. If you are not already following Steve Sketches, please do go give Steve Sketches a follow. He's a great artist that sometimes plays some video games towards the end of his stream. If you like doing art stuff or just like hanging out with people that kind of like the same kind of stuff that we do around here, good stuff. Thank you so much, Steve. For those of you that might not know me, my name is Shane. This is Adventures in History. We talk about historical stuff in a way that is not threatening, that is really easy to approach. We tell lots of bad jokes. We goof off, have a good time. Tonight we're talking about the process of Rome converting to Christianity, and we're doing that with some pictures right now, which is why I'm wearing the adventure hat. You're glad you weren't imagining what they were looking like? Yeah, it's a very static pose. It is. It was not as rich of a statue as the original picture. Yeah, Dominant Dude. There were a lot of them. We'll show them here in just a second again. With rather visual differences to the earlier Artemis statue, how did people identify this as Artemis? You assume there are other material sources that help connect that, but you wouldn't personally make that connection from this. That's actually a great question, Metran. The answer here is that they would have known all of the different aspects of Artemis, and they all had individual names. So for those of you that are just coming in, we're talking about Roman deity aspects, which is basically different ways that they could show themselves. So if we're going back over here to our images, this is the goddess Artemis in what we might consider her sort of traditional form. This is, kind of like a statue that you might just see anywhere. But there was also this version of Artemis that is here, which again doesn't have a head or the rest of its arms. But this is Artemis in her sort of great mother form. And we know that it's the great mother form because of all of the breasts here. This does have a cloak on. These are not like, there are no nipples. So Twitch can't get angry at me right now. But as an example, Jupiter, right? So Jupiter was probably the one that had the most aspects. The big one that had the temple in the middle of Rome on the Capitoline Hill was called Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Jupiter best and greatest, right? But there were all of these other Jupiter aspects. There was Jupiter Tonans, which is Jupiter the Thunderer. And you would show Jupiter in the same way, but he would be holding a thunderbolt, right? Instead of sort of sitting on his throne. When you did Jupiter Optimus Maximus, he's usually sitting on his throne. It's like he's ruling everything. But Jupiter Tonans usually had the thunderbolt in his hand, like he was going to strike you. She is the goddess of many, many things, including the moon, the hunt, the childbirth, virginity, and wild animals. Goddess of childbirth and virginity. Yeah. Artemis was the person of culture. Indeed, she was. So there are a lot of these different aspects. And some of these aspects took on sort of little vogue centers of interest. And what we end up having are these things developing that get called mystery cults. A mystery cult. And you're like, what the devil is that? Well, there's a difference between the way that the Romans would participate in a mystery cult and the way that they would participate in what we might call sort of general Roman religion. General Roman religion was very public. You would go out to the temple, you would do your sacrifice in public, you would do your praying in public, you would have your festivals in public. But the vogue thing became these little private meetings where you would have small groups of people maybe going to somewhere that was private, like an underground building or a house or a cave, or maybe out into the wilderness on top of a mountain where there's a little ritual site. And some of these aspects became mystery cult items, or these little small groups of people that would go out and do stuff for these particular gods. A great way to assimilate other cultures' deities into your own theology. Oh, that you had this god X? Exactly, Metrian. That is exactly the case. This is one of the main functions of syncretism within Rome. I would go take you over, and I would say, oh, look, you have a storm god. You might just call him Baal in your language. But here's the deal. We have a storm god too, right? Our storm god is just called Jupiter. So what does your storm god do? And you're like, oh, I'm going to throw lightning bolts. Well, look, our god throws lightning bolts too. Does your god do rain? Yeah, our god does rain. Does your god have this like weird relationship to like killing everybody else in the pantheon? He's like, yeah, our god does. See, we're talking about the same guy, right? You just call him something different. And if you want, when we put our Temple of Jupiter up here, we'll give you kind of like a special little regional name. And you can just be like, look, we know that this guy's kind of like our version of that guy, so we're not really changing the God that we worship. We're just saying a different word when we say our prayers. And that kind of makes sense because these guys don't speak our language, so it's kind of okay, all right? Our God is so vague and so specific, right? Right? So this syncretism stuff, and it's a good functional part of Rome. But these mystery cults become very, very big, especially if we're looking at the 3rd and 4th century, so the 200s to 400s. Mystery cults become incredibly popular, especially among the elite, the people that have the money to sort of join these little groups. If you joined a mystery cult, there was almost always some sort of initiation. You had to go through some sort of process where you were turned into an initiate, and then you had to get full membership. The most famous of these, of course, is the group that's called the Eleusinian Mysteries, which began in Greece, a little place called Eleusis, which is sort of just north of Athens. So Athens is right here. Eleusis is right about here. In the ancient world. There's a modern place that you can go. I was planning on going there, but the ferry kind of goofed up and didn't run on time while we were in Greece, and I did not have a chance to go to Eleusis, so I do not have any personal pictures of the Eleusinian location. We can just remember that they're important, but we have all of these other mystery cults that pop up, and especially stuff that comes from the East, right? These Eastern ideas become very popular in the Western part of Rome, because the East was much more cosmopolitan than the West was. They had bigger cities, they had much more storied histories. So goddesses like Isis, who were these ancient Roman gods, became the center of these really big mystery cults. And you see things like Sol Invictus. If you remember the unconquered sun that we talked about last week when Constantine was taking over, or if you were with us when we were talking about the sort of weird Roman Emperor Elagabalus, he had this sort of strange asphyxiation with this particular god from Syria that was the solar deity. So this is still Sol Invictus, right? He's just this particular Eastern sun god that kind of becomes the center of a mystery cult in Rome. Hey, Rocket, good to see you. For those of you that do not know, we have Rocket Sage in the house. Rocket Sage is a geologist. So if you dig geology or hanging around and chatting geology or rocks or volcanoes or glaciers, all kinds of cool stuff, go give Rocket Sage a follow. Yeah, it was a pun. We do lots of puns here. We're very punny people. Go give Rocket Sage a follow. It's a great time. Lots of interesting material. Takes questions, is very good about answering them in ways that let you understand the deep stuff easily, right? Not talking over people's heads. It's good stuff. You should go give Rocket Sage a follow. If you dig geology, yeah. Hey, Tropical, good to see you. I'm a guy. I do my thing, right? So we're talking Roman mystery cults and stuff right now on our way towards basically converting Rome from what we might consider paganism to Christianity. Question is how deep it goes. Roman history, you're down, but boom. All right. So one of the biggest mystery cults was the cult of this Eastern deity called Mithras. Mithras was originally a really, really old Aryan/Vedic god over in India and Central Asia that had sort of made his cult way through Persia. Mithras had been sort of absorbed and syncretized into Zoroastrianism, which was the official religion of the Persian. No, I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. Spartacus.
Tropical Geek. Thank you so much. Oh, that was Rocket Sage gifting a sub. Rocket, thank you for the gift. Tropical, welcome to the Spartacus Club. Right? We get to share little Spartacus emotes. I'm Spartacus. All right. So, for education, Rocket Sage, by the way, one of the founding members of TKF. So, a part of the Knowledge Fellowship, a group of educational streamers. I really need to make a TKF command. I need to do that. I've been very dilatory in my deeds. Anyway, there's a whole group of educational streamers on Twitch that take this opportunity to kind of talk and goof off with people, but also share the knowledge. So I just got inducted into the group a few months ago. It's been a good time. Found a lot of new friends, followed lots of new cool people. So anyway, Mithras. Mithras was one of the biggest ones. It was very popular, or Mithras worship was very popular over in the East. And I should note, by the way, lots of adventure hat options tonight. So I get to put the adventure hat back on. For those of you that do not know, that might have just come in. Again, this is the adventure hat. I bring it with me when I go do all of the fun archaeological travel-y things because I'm super pasty pale and my ears get sunburned. Also, I'm kind of going a little bit thin up at top, and I keep my hair kind of short, so I get pasty skin burn on my head. You don't want sunburn in your hair. It's just bad. So the adventure hat goes with me. It's been to 3 continents and like 10 different countries, and I love it probably more than I should love a physical object. But the adventure hat, it gets to come out when I show pictures of places that I have been or places that I have, things that I have seen, etc. You've been wanting to learn about gods. Very clutch stream to spoon feed me this. Awesome. Yeah, man. And also, feel free to ask questions. I don't mind getting sidetracked on tangents. If you want to throw something out there that doesn't necessarily directly kind of get involved in the material, I'll be happy to answer it. And I'll loop it back in. Dun, dun, dun. Crunchy Fox, thanks so much for that follow. And welcome to the adventure. All right, so let's look at some photos. This, boop, boop, ba-doo. This is a cave, and you're like, oh, look. And I guess it's kind of ironic that we've got Rocket with us because I could probably ask about stuff like sediment layers and such.
Romans.
Countrymen, lend me your ears.
Come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
Tropical, thank you for the host, my friend. All right, so this is a cave. This is at a location called Dolichae. Dolichae is a site in modern-day Turkey, but this particular cave here was originally a natural cave, but as you can tell, basically here by all of these nice straight lines, it had been altered. And that's a bit of a joke, like, I'll spell it out for you, like this, like altered, because inside of this cave, if we go in, oh boom, we have ourselves a Mithraeum. A Mithraeum, yes. So this cave was the site of a mystery cult meeting location where they did their mystery cult stuff for the god Mithras. And they had themselves here a little basin for some water. They had themselves an altar where they did some sacrificing stuff. They had carved out neat little things. I have many more pictures of this particular cave. There are some inscriptions in the cave itself. They are very difficult to read in photographical evidence. I tried to even turn them into like black and white and blow up the contrast. It's just really hard to see all of the stuff. But there's a bull here engraved, and there's another bull over here. One of the signs of Mithras was a bull. Middle Earth, what mythology is that? Tolkien. I'm a gigantic J.R.R. Tolkien fan. So when we hit 100s of followers, so like when we hit 100s or 200s or 300s or 400s or 500s, I do a History of Middle Earth stream where we actually talk about the history of Middle Earth as Tolkien would have made his world. So like all of the old elven stuff and the creation of the world and the eagles and all of the first age things. So yeah. Sacrifice. Like they're killing animals down here for Mithras. But again, they did this because it's a private location. So again, these mystery cults are not doing things out in public. They're doing their own private little religious ceremonies. They have been inducted into these little communities. They're very frequently possessing some sort of secret knowledge, right? There's some Gnosticism here. The hidden knowledge that we possess as our little group. You know, this is like your kind of stereotypical secret handshake kind of thing, right? So there we go. There's a Mithraeum for you. So we have all of these mystery cults, and things are going great, and things are kind of moving along in the Roman world. And then comes this Christianity thing. So how does this Christianity even work into the larger Roman religious world? And the answer is it just doesn't fit very well. The Romans do not care for Christianity at all. Because again, if you'll remember what we mentioned, and we've had a lot of visitors since we first talked about that. So let me throw this back up here again. There's this idea that the Romans had called the Pax Deorum, or the peace with the gods. So you've got to keep peace with the gods, or they're going to wreck Rome and take away their blessing and take away their protection. And this Christianity thing that came around and said, you know, all of your gods are fake and they don't really matter, that was sort of like very much anti-Pax Deorum. That's like Bellum Deorum, or war with the gods, right? Everybody knows Latin, sure. You can throw all these fancy words around, Jane, right? Think the Romans nailed that thing about Christian iconography. Oh, nailed. Haha. Yeah, they did kind of nail that. Yeah. I see what you did there. Yeah. So when Christianity first shows up, of course, it's a very small religion. It is not very big. It's mostly going to be spread by the followers of these early people that converted to Christianity. Most of the original converts were Jewish people. So for about the first probably couple of decades or so that Christianity existed, Rome didn't even really know that there was a difference between Christians and Jews. That didn't really happen until the First Roman Revolt, which happened in 67. At that point, the Jewish leadership sort of tattled on the Christians because, well, there's this whole thing that the Jewish people in Jerusalem are trying to revolt against Rome, and they asked the Christians to help. The Christians said no, so then the Romans got told, hey, by the way, the Christians aren't Jewish, so if you want to kill them, you can totally do that and get away with it, and we'll be fine with it. So this is sort of when Rome figures out that Christianity is different than Judaism. But it spreads fairly slowly. It's mostly spreading through these individual people moving around, having these small community groups. The sort of prevailing idea that a lot of people have in Rome is that this Jesus guy is kind of just like a Jewish mystery cult, right? Because he claimed to be a Jew, and if you don't really know the difference between Judaism and Christianity, it looks kind of like these people, they have their one little god, and they claim to have knowledge of the right way, and they have these initiation rituals where you have to eat this little meal and you get dunked in this water thing, and that looks a lot like a mystery cult. And this is actually sort of how Christianity skates by for a little while. Streaming 50 minutes. Did I miss one of the most important things to have ever happened? You've missed about 50 minutes of it, Vipers. We're actually just getting to the point of talking about how Christianity was living inside of the larger Roman world. We have so far mostly described Roman religion and how things were changing inside of the Roman religion. And now we're sort of trying to get Christianity to fit somehow, and it just doesn't overlap a lot. So early Christians could kind of recognize that they were hiding out as one of these super little secret mystery cults, and that's kind of okay for them because, again, Christianity was illegal. But if we get a little bit closer to our time that we're talking about, our 4th century, we run into the laws of this guy. So this is the Roman Emperor Decius. And Decius is not a fan of Christianity at all. And to be fair, lots of the Roman emperors prior to Decius had done significant amounts of persecution. Is that a neckbeard? Yeah, that's a pretty strong neckbeard. It's basically really, really big sideburns that go all the way down to the neck. This was actually quite common among soldiers because the helmets that they wore had these cheek guards that would sort of come down and tie under your head right here. So having some additional padding to that kept it from rubbing so much. So if you see somebody with like the big honking like sideburn chop things, that's pretty good indication that they're trying to say this guy was a soldier, and Decius was. Now, you might wonder why an emperor that came from the military background would be so angry about Christianity. Well, it's because one of the biggest concentrations of Christianity in the Roman world during this period of time was in the military. And there's a little bit of an interesting scenario here that happens with the Roman military. The people that joined up with the Roman army or the Roman navy were some of the most well-traveled people of the entire ancient world, right? So Rome covered basically everything that you see down there, and probably even a little bit more if I could position it exactly right. Basically everything on that map down there was part of Rome. So you could have people from Egypt that are getting stationed in Britain, or people from what is modern-day Morocco getting stationed in what is modern-day Armenia. So you could end up all over the Roman world and everywhere in between. And because of this, these people that were in the military had access to all of these different ideas, right? As they're traveling, they're seeing the way that different people live, they're experiencing these different ideas, they're finding things that they think are kind of cool and neat. And Christianity appeals to a lot of these people, because the military was mostly full of people that did not really have a lot of social mobility. The average everyday Roman soldier, very much kind of like it is today in America, unfortunately, joined the military because that was a viable job option. Now, the sort of the command structure of the Roman military was still very much a rich person's game, and you got into military as a low-level non-commissioned officer, and you did your thing for a little while and maybe got elected into a position as sort of a way to move up the social ladder. But the average everyday Roman soldier was kind of a poor person. And if you look at the teachings of Christianity, there's a lot of military symbolism. You have the armor of God, and you have the Christian soldiers, and you have the fight against evil. And especially inside of Christianity, what brought a lot of people's attention was basically the leveling of the social playing field. So a lot of people in the lower social orders inside of Rome looked at Christianity as a way to, if you're not familiar with Christian teachings, that's perfectly fine. One of the things that it basically says in Christianity is that everybody is equal in the sight of God. So there's sort of a non-social class world when it comes to Christian believers. So this appealed a lot to people with lower social standing because to them, hey, look, this means that we're all equal. We don't really have to pretend like we're poor people or, lower class people anymore. So Decius is being exposed to a lot of growing numbers of soldiers that are converting to Christianity. And so Decius in the year 250 passes this law that says every person that is a citizen of Rome has to conduct sacrifice. Dun dun dun. Jay Stiller, thank you so much for that follow. And welcome to the adventure. Right? So Decius says that you've got to do a sacrifice. And you've got to do this sacrifice in front of a priest. And it has to be a sacrifice to a Roman god. And this is very much kind of a targeted attack against Christianity because no self-respecting Christian would have sacrificed to the pagan gods. Is anyone else having stream stuttering? Or should I check your connection? No, it's me. I'm dropping some frames a little bit here and there. It's better than it was on the stream on Tuesday, but I'm still dropping an unfortunately high number of frames. I really don't know what's up with that. My connection still says that it's strong. My CPU's not overloaded. Maybe I need to update OBS. Who knows? I wish I did. Shane always has some stuttering. Yeah, I'm weird like that. I live in very rural southern Mississippi, and my internet is not particularly reliable. So apologies, my friends. Also, hey, Afagach, good to see you. Okay. No, don't start pulling cables. So Decius passes this law, says everybody's got to sacrifice. This is a big deal because this is going to cause a lot of people, even a lot of people inside of the Roman military, to get killed because the punishment for not doing the sacrifice is murder. The state would kill you. This, of course, is during the middle of this period of time that we call the crisis of the 3rd century. And during this period of time from the end of the Severan dynasty to the beginning of Diocletian, so this is like 226 to 284, there's this gigantic, massive civil war inside of Rome. And the idea was that the Pax Deorum had been completely wrecked. So Decius is kind of hiding this anti-Christian law and the idea of also all of these sacrifices will make the gods happy and we'll stop being in this giant 50-year-long civil war. Right? Okay, so how are these people actually then moving, right? Well, we have to remember that this is going to start mostly in the port cities. So if we look at most of the big Christian cities, places like Alexandria here in Egypt, places like Antioch here on the coast of what is today Syria, places like Rome, which had a port city just right down the river, a place called Ostia. These big cities were all going to be port cities. But by the time we get to our 4th century, the smaller cities kind of in the hinterlands had started receiving the first real, what we might consider stable populations of Christianity. And a lot of them were moving along the Roman road network. And hey, you go, what does a Roman road look like? Well, it just so happens that I get to put the adventure hat back on and show you some Roman roads. It's kind of hard to show pictures about religious ideas, so I figured I'd kind of spice it up with lots of adventure hat situations. I'm not speaking well tonight, so let's throw some hats and let's look at some pictures. Boom, here we go. Roman roads. All right, so this Rome, yes, gosh, maybe I should pause for a second. How are you all? How's things going in your world? Apologize if you did not stream. Yeah, I do what I can. And by the way, let me remind everybody, you're absolutely welcome to throw out questions. I really enjoy talking about stuff that you all want to know. I do plan, kind of my own little thing to just run my mouth about. But I. Dun, 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 dun. Alvon or AI Von? I don't know exactly which one that is. Thank you so much for the follow, and welcome to the adventure. Is this where they make the Appian Way pizza? Appian, the Appian Road is in Rome, just to the north side of the city there, or I guess kind of northeastern side of the city. Anyway, this particular road is not. It is AI Vaughn. There we go. Keep it up. Drink water. Yeah, that's a good idea. I've got a little bit of a beverage right here. I'll take a sip of. Specifically, the Via Appia is a road that's in modern-day Italy. This is the Via Egnatia. This is in Greece. In summer of 2019, the last trip that I was able to make before the COVID, I took one of the mods in the chat, Mac, with me, and we putted along the Grecian world. So what is this along the left side of the road? Romans also had tombstones. So the idea is that Greece back in 2016 had tried to turn this particular stretch of the Via Egnatia into a tourist destination. Ovidk, as the Romans would say. I what you say, I'll wait uye there. So this is the remains of some electrical lighting that would have run down the road. If you get down here, there was a little bit of a sitting area with a few big plaques that sort of described exactly what the road was. But the Greek government ran out of money in 2017 and almost defaulted in 2018, and they basically abandoned a whole bunch of money on a lot of different sites that they never actually finished. Yeah, tombstones of a failed project. Correct. So this is a Roman road. This particular stretch of the road runs down from the Mediterranean, which you can see right here, up to some Greek cities that were in the sort of central heartland part of the eastern part of Greece. So these are the kinds of roads that would have carried Christian missionaries. If you kept walking on this road, you would end up at the big city of Philippi. And if you're familiar with the Christian Bible, you'll know that one of the books of the Bible is called Philippians, which was a letter written to the church at Philippi. So there is a very good chance that ancient Christians would have walked down this road trying to get to that city to try to do some conversion work. Here is another stretch of Roman road. This particular location is at a place in Turkey. The city, in the ancient city, this was the gate of the ancient city called Tarsus. If you are familiar with, again, your Christian biblical history, the Apostle Paul was Paul of Tarsus. So if you were in the betting mood, you could bet that the Apostle Paul, assuming you believe he existed, walked down this road at one point to potentially spread the Christian faith to other people. So this Roman road network actually did play a significant part in the expansion of early Christianity. But again, it's still illegal. It's not something that everybody is sort of flocking to. And the Roman imperial government really does hate it quite a bit. And by the time you get to the 280s with the people like Diocletian and Galerius, if you have been with us for the last few streams that we've done about Rome, you'll know that both Diocletian and Galerius participated in a particular historical event called the Great Persecution, where they killed hundreds of thousands of Christians across the entire Roman world. This was a pretty big deal. So keep that in mind, because if you look at the end of Diocletian's reign in the 300s, very early 300s, like 305, you would never guess that the next solo Roman emperor, Constantine, would be a Christian. But here's this guy. Here comes Constantine. So we talked about Constantine last week. Constantine had this conversion event. He was in a big civil war. He was trying to become a unified Roman emperor of the entire Roman Empire. He was stuck just north of Rome at this little place called the Milvian Bridge. He felt for certain like he was going to end up dead in the next day's battle. And he looked up into the sky and he saw this sign and he heard this voice from the sky that said, conquer your enemies using this sign. So he had all of his people painted on their shields and went out the next day and won the battle. And that sign turned out to be one of the Christian symbols. So we go from Rome that had centuries worth of laws. Hey, Sleepless, good to see you. Centuries worth of laws that were completely banning Christianity. We had big rounds of persecution where they were killing thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And then Constantine decides, I'm going to be a Christian. That flips the world on its head. Nobody expects this, right? Nobody is expecting Constantine to convert to Christianity, and nobody really understands exactly how he's going to do this. So what happens? We talked about Constantine's political reforms and his economic reforms and his military reforms and all of that stuff last week. By the way, I save all of my VODs, so if this is the first time that you're hanging around and you go, I wonder if he talked about that thing that happened before this stream. Yeah, I probably did. And it's probably in a VOD that you are welcome to go look through. I also do viewer request streams, so there's even a pretty good chance that I've done some weird thing that you might go, oh, that's kind of fascinating. Worse things have happened in our recent history. Yeah, like COVID. Ovid-Kate. Right? Anyway, so Constantine is going to flip the script. He converts to Christianity. Or does he? Here's the question. There's a lot of debate amongst historical scholars about whether or not Constantine really converted to Christianity. Did he really convert? Or did he kind of convert? Or did he convert in name and not in action? Yeah, there's some weird evidence on both sides. But one of the things that we can say for certain is that he was interested. He was interested in Christianity. And he starts asking questions. Bum, ba-dum. Dun, 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 dun. Dominant Dude, thank you so much for that follow. And welcome to the adventure. So he starts asking these questions. And he's like, hey, I want to know about Christianity. So what can you tell me? And this is where he discovers something a little bit probably not so hype for him. Be watching the VOD. Thanks for streaming. Absolutely. Thanks for coming in. I hope you have a good one, and see you next time. See you around the bend, whatever happens, So here's what had been going on, right? This big persecution inside of the Roman world had caused some fairly significant repercussions inside of the Christian world. First and foremost, they didn't really have the ability to meet. You couldn't get all of the Christian leaders together in one place because, first off, it's just dangerous to travel in the ancient world. Also, Rome would not have allowed some big meeting of these Christian leaders to go unnoticed, and they could have descended upon them and basically killed all of them. So there was a lot of separation between the leaders of Christianity, and 4 cities had sort of become kind of like big brothers, and these were the cities of Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. So these are sort of the big four cities. And the people that led there were given the title archbishop. And they were sort of the ones that had to settle the differences. If somebody had a question about what Christianity said or didn't say, they would have to end up asking questions up to the archbishop, who would make a ruling. But they didn't always agree. And there's some reasons they didn't always agree, right? There was not a Bible at this time. There was no collected single group of Christian scriptures. And the Roman world was very big. And a lot of the Christian communities, sort of these very small, sometimes, maybe 5 or 6 member church groups, didn't have access to a lot of the scriptures that had been sort of spread around. They might have one copy of this gospel book. They might have one letter of Paul. They might have this other thing, and that's all that they had. So their ideas about what was the most important part of Christianity were a little bit different, because they did not have the total collection of all of the books that Christians now consider sacred. And this leads to a little bit of sort of regional flavors, especially down here in Egypt. Egypt had always been very religiously independent and unique, and Egypt was going to have kind of its own little flavor of Christianity. They should have bought the bundle package. Well, see, here's the thing. Christianity was doing this thing where you had to kind of buy in, and then the developers were doing these rollouts where, they were doing test batches. Some areas would get certain rollouts and others wouldn't. So, you kind of buy in and you don't even get the right DLC. This is very much like beta testing, right? It's very much like early access Christianity. You never really know which version you're going to get. They're mostly the same. They almost all have the same kind of base ideology, but when it comes to the application of some of this theology, it gets a little squirrely and different. So this, again, is partially because of the persecution, but also partially because of the distance and because of the different levels of access to their different scriptures. So there's a little bit of an argument going on in Christianity. So when Constantine says, hey, tell me about Christianity, he gets a lot of different ideas. And especially from Egypt, there's this guy down there called AiH, who has this really very unique idea that nobody else agrees with, but he's pushing it really hard, and the people in his church are like, hey, that's our guy, so we're going to follow him. And Constantine goes, look, guys, we got to do something here, because honestly, I want to know, and if I'm going to make you all legal, which he does in 313 with something called the Edict of Milan. If you're going to be a legal religion now, you got to get your act together, and you all have to decide how you're going to interpret your books and how you're going to interpret your theology the right way. So he calls something which is one of the more important events. The Council of Nicaea. And I know it looks like Nicaea, but Greek is a weird language. And there we are. And you go, okay, where is that? Well, it's actually in modern-day Turkey. It's just across from Constantinople. So Constantinople was right here. Nicaea is right over here. It's kind of a vacation area for the elite that are in Constantinople. You go across the Sea of Marmara right here. You hang out. That's where we get the Nicene Creed, Foggage, exactly. And the church that they met in is right here. It's under a lake. Oh, I should be wearing the adventure hat right now. When I was in Turkey, we made a trip to Nicaea, and the original location where they met is kind of right out here. But it's a pretty lake, and it's a nice view. So, yeah, there's the Turkish mountains and this really pretty lake. It is hat time. Yeah, lots of hat time today. I wish I had better pictures, but, you kind of have to be an underwater archaeologist, and I don't have scuba license, and carrying scuba gear on an airplane is just a big, big mess. So, yeah. Adventure hat because I showed you a picture of a lake. I guess I'll take it, right? Anyway, so we have this big meeting called the Council of Nicaea, and this is in 325. So what is this about? Well, Constantine sends out messages basically to everybody that was a church leader in the entire Roman world. It's like, okay, look, everybody show up. We're going to talk it out. We're going to figure out like what is theology and what isn't theology. And this is actually a moment where a lot of people have a very sort of one side or other view of what happens at Nicaea. A lot of people that are sort of coming at this from a non-religious or anti-Christian angle will say, oh, this is where Constantine decided that Jesus was God. That is not the case. It is absolutely unprovable that that is the case. There is textual, literary, and graphical evidence that Christians believe Jesus was God prior to this.
You shall have camels, horses,
Rose Ferry?
escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks.
You're welcome.
Rose Ferry, thank you so much. For those of you that are interested, that will be added to our goal here. Let me see if I can manually do that. I think I might be able to. But thank you all for that. Thank you all so much. Remember, we are doing this this is a charity stream, so we're collecting money for Starlight Children's Foundation. You can click the link there to donate. Let me see if I can change that manually. Maybe? Question mark? I don't think I can because I think that is linked through the back to Tiltify. So I think what I would probably have to do is go in and donate it myself, question mark? Oh man, I'll have to figure that out. I don't want to stare blankly at a screen in the middle. But thank you all so much for the donation. That was very generous. I can't manually change that without actually going and doing the donation myself. I will put all that stuff together on the back end. But thank you all very much. It's Steve's fault. Rose, thank you very so much. I hope that this is something that's kind of up your alley. I know that you're kind of into this world. So again, some people that are coming at this from like a kind of either non-Christian or anti-Christian angle will say, oh, well, this is where they sort of decided that Jesus was God and they kind of ironed out all of their ideas. What really is happening at the Council of Nicaea is that the people that are in agreement, which was the vast majority of them, are trying to get the people that are not in agreement to get back into agreement. And there are a few people like this guy Arius, who was the archbishop down in Egypt, that had a lot of weird ideas. And this is actually going to bring us to a weird little situation with this guy. So this is Saint Nicholas of Myra. And you go, wait, Saint Nicholas, could he be? And indeed, it is he. This is the guy that is the basis of Santa Claus. So this is the original Saint Nick. Yep. Saint Nicholas of Myra. He's Turkish. He was a Turkish Christian, leader of a church in Turkey. Goes on to become a saint. And he was at the Council of Nicaea. Now, let me say this up front. Foggage, whoop whoop. Is tomorrow his feast day? I don't know. But Foggage, thank you so much for that donation. Much appreciated. You thought he was Nordic. No, St. Nicholas of Myra is originally a Turkish saint. You might be thinking of Sinterklaas, which is kind of a Northern European analog for Saint Nicholas or Santa Claus. There's a lot of Slavic influence that kind of gets built into Santa Claus. That might actually be an interesting stream to do around Christmas time. The history of Santa Claus. Anyway, about this Saint Nick, I should state, just so that I'm being clear and being honest here, there's basically no conclusive evidence that this happened. However, it's a great story and I love telling it. And it also brings us to the pun stream of the night. So the story goes that Arius, who was basically teaching that Jesus was kind of possessed by a God spirit and not actually God himself, which is this heresy that was referred to as Arianism. He was in the Council of Nicaea basically yelling and trying to get all of his stuff right. And St. Nicholas of Myra kind of got up in his face and he called him a heretic. And it's like, you're preaching heresy. And Arius got really upset and started calling him names. So St. Nicholas punched him out. So he knew who was naughty and who was nice, and he punched out the heretics. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. So St. Nicholas punched out the heretics. This led a group of college friends and I who were history majors. By the way, my undergraduate degree is in history and religion, so I studied a lot of this stuff very, very closely. It led a few people in my history class to make a shirt that said, "I'm here to settle Christological heresies and punch heretics," and we've settled all the Christological heresies. So there you go. Feel that burn, right? So much coal for Christmas. Right? So, anyway, what comes out of this meeting? Well, one of the most important things that comes out of this meeting is this thing called... what's going on here? The Nicene Creed. The Nicene Creed is something that the group of the church leaders there agree on, and it basically says effectively the very, very most basic tenets of what it is to be a Christian. And creed comes from the Latin word credo, which means I believe, which is the first word of the creed. But this brings us back to St. Nicholas, who could have potentially stood over Arius and said, "You gonna do something or just stand there and creed?" Which is, of course, a great line from the movie Tombstone. If you haven't ever seen Tombstone, you should go watch Tombstone. The character Wyatt Earp smacks this kind of dandy guy and busts his lip open, and the dandy guy is kind of getting upset. He goes, "Are you going to do something about it, or are you just going to stand there and bleed?" Which is a great line. Tombstone has so many great one-liners like that. One God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, JMR, good to see you. How's it going? For those of you that do not know, we've got JMR Killer in the house. JMR Killer is a game streamer mostly, but has also started doing some Gundam building or Lego building, depending on when you catch him, or model building when you've been depending on catching him. So turning into a bit of a variety streamer. But it's always a good time hanging out in the gaming fort. You should totally go hang out. I particularly enjoy the Saturday morning game sessions because it's like being a kid again, right? But now you have the band stuck in your head. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, so the Council of Nicaea says, here's what Christianity is. And this is a pretty big deal because now they have a framework and they publish this and they send it all over the Roman world. And basically, if you don't agree with this, you're not a Christian. And this is targeted at heresy and all of these ideas that had sort of cropped up as a cause and effect relationship because of these persecutional issues. So Christianity at this point had only been legal for 12 years. And it was hard to even make sense of what was going on because they had just sort of come out of this repressive dark age and they didn't really understand what was up. And Constantine was like, I want to know what's up. So what else comes out of the Council of Nicaea? Well, they get the establishing of these cities that are called the five patriarchs. These are going to be the 5 basically capital cities of Christianity. And you already know 4 of them: Rome, Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Antioch. Now, these are supposedly all churches that had been founded by disciples of Jesus directly. And Constantine sneaks in Constantinople. Because he's like, if Rome's going to be one, Constantinople really should be one too, right? And they're like, well, I mean, you founded Constantinople. And he's like, but there was a city here before, and it was called Byzantium. And they're like, that really wasn't a city. It was kind of like a fishing village. And he's like, but there were disciples coming through here, and there were some Christians through here. Anyway, he sort of like gets Constantinople added because he wants to be very much involved. This is going to begin a period of time where the emperors are going to be very involved in the running of the church. And there's a term here called Caesaropapism. And that's a really big, long word. Caesaropapism, which is basically military, not military, the union of church and state. The emperor is going to have a lot of say-so over the running of Christianity. You could not be patriarch of Constantinople if the emperor didn't give you the thumbs up. So it's a pretty big deal. By this time, the West was hanging out. So we're like in 325. Caesar and the Pope, right. Caesar and the Pope get put together. So we're going to get rid of heresy. We're going to promote what Christianity actually is. And we're going to establish the leader churches that are going to be able to settle daily disputes within the Christian world. Again, this happens in the span of just 12 years. And this is a humongous amount of progress in just a short period of time. Give the Pope what belongs to the Pope and give me what belongs to me. Is this a rendering of a Bible verse, perhaps there, Tropical Geek? See what I did there? When did the first Pope appear, and how did the Vatican become a thing? Assuming we're a bit away from that, and it might... No. This is actually a great time to talk about this. So, where did the Pope come from? So, if we're looking at the Roman world, and we're looking at where these big patriarch cities come from, remember that we have 5 patriarch cities, and remember, in Spanish. So really? You were taught it says the Pope? So the particular verse in the Bible says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Not the Pope. That's an interesting translation there. He was originally a senator from Naboo, if you recall correctly. Yes, that's the Saint Palpatine. Was Constantine truly Christian, or was it a convenience? He got baptized on his deathbed. So there's that. He gave a lot of money to Christianity, but he also let the Roman priests build temples to worship him like a god. He built statues of himself dressed up like pagan gods, but also built churches. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. He probably didn't understand what being a good Christian was because, just to be honest, nobody really knew what it was in the Roman world. If you weren't already a Christian, you probably had not been exposed to a lot of Christianity because it had to be kept on the down low. So, all right, so back to this idea of where the Pope came from. All right, so if you have been on streams before, you'll know that Rome had been split into the East and the West under this guy named Diocletian. But if you didn't, Rome got split between East and West by this guy named Diocletian, who took over Rome in 284 and then split the empire in half. And the split was right about here. So there's a line, and that turns this into Eastern Rome, and it turns this into Western Rome. So, if we're looking at where our 5 big cities are, we've got Rome here, we've got Alexandria here, Jerusalem here, Antioch here, and Constantinople here. So, if we're looking at halves, in the eastern half of the empire, we have 4 patriarchs. And in the western half of the empire, we have 1. So this entire half of the empire, the entire western half of the Roman Empire, was technically under the ecumenical see, which is basically like the governorship, if you will, of the bishop in Rome. And that gave that guy a lot of flex because he has this entire half of the empire that's kind of his. So even as the early churches, this is going to be a pretty big deal. So the first technical pope is really just the first leader of the church that's in Rome. And technically, that was the disciple Peter, if you are going to follow the Christian tradition. So the disciple Peter went to Rome and established the first church there and was the first leader of the first church there. So he's technically the first pope. Now, this is where it gets a little bit scripturally. So there's this particular instance in the Bible where Jesus is sitting around with the disciples and he says, "Who do people think that I am?" And this is kind of like a pop quiz from Jesus. And the disciples are like, "Oh, crud. Some people say that you are a prophet." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, but who do you think I am?" And at that point, this guy named Simon goes, "You are God." And Jesus is like, "Yeah, you got it." And the actual verse says, this is accurate. And blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. So Simon was his name. Bar means son of Jonah. So Simon, son of Jonah. For you did not know, man did not reveal this to you, but God revealed this to you. And I will change your name to Peter. Right? So Peter comes from the word Petros, which is Greek for rock. And then the next line says, "And upon this rock I shall build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So the way that the people in Rome interpreted that was literally saying that Jesus had specifically chosen Peter to be the head of the church. So he changed his name to Rock and then said, "Upon this rock," and they say he's referring to Peter, "I will build my church." Now, the rest of the world said what he's talking about is this statement that he was God, right? So upon this belief that I am God, I'm going to build my church. But the bishops in Rome go, no, he literally meant Peter. And Peter founded our church, so that means we're the head. We're in charge. And they had this half of the empire that answered to them. So they had all of this territory already. They had all of this prestige and this clout. And then they go, and also Jesus said so. And over time, that is going to start driving a wedge between the Western world and the Eastern world. And this accelerates after 476 when Rome collapses in the West. And the only thing that's really left is the Pope. The sad thing is that the main thing you'll take away from this is that the Roman Empire section of History of the World Part 1 was set sometime before 325. Vipers, that is not a bad takeaway. The Catholic consider Peter as Pope, but what about Orthodox? So Orthodox Christianity does not refer to a Pope at all. They just refer to this as the Patriarch in Rome, not the Pope. So Pope comes from Papa, which means father, and it's sort of a special term that's used specifically for the Bishop of Rome, and the rest of the world does not refer to him with the reverence that the Roman Catholic Church does. So I know that was a big sidetrack, but I know a lot about this stuff because I've studied it pretty extensively, and I feel like it was a good question, so I may as well answer it, right? Okie dokie. So that was a bit of a sidetrack, but a worthy one. Let us get to what's going on after the Council of Nicaea, because Constantine wasn't done, right? He ruled for another 30 years. Well, not another 30 years, another 7 or 8 years. And in this period of time, he's going to do a lot of stuff. Most notably, he's going to start giving a ton of money to Christians, especially his mother, this woman named Helena. He is going to send her to the Holy Land over here in Jerusalem and Judea and the regions of like Galilee and Nazareth and all of the places that you know of from the Bible stories. And they're going to start building these gigantic churches, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is one of the most famous churches in all of Christianity. The original version does not stand anymore. The version that exists now is actually one that was basically built during the Crusade time and then sort of rebuilt during the 1400s. But that's a whole other story, Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's still there. They actually just added that to Google Street View. If we want to, we can kind of zoom. Nope, I want to go there. So this is in modern-day Jerusalem. It's very close to the Temple Mount. But if you want to, you can walk around in one of the more important churches in Christian history. This is one that was originally funded by Constantine, and it includes the burial site, the tomb of Jesus, and the hill of Golgotha, where tradition says that he was crucified. So this is actually inside the church now. I don't know exactly where we are. Maybe I can... Ooh, what's going on here? Maybe we can go over here. Yeah, here we go. So this little standing place right here used to be a big wall, and now it's just sort of like this last little standing rock that has been carved out. Basically everything around it has been carved out. And this is the traditional tomb of Jesus. So this is a big church that had been built way back under the time of Constantine, that his mom located the location of, or identified the location of, and you can still go visit this church now if you want to. Again, one of the more important churches of Christian history. So he's giving a lot of money to Christianity. He is donating a ton of the treasury, not just his personal money, but the Roman treasury, the official Roman material treasury thing. Is that me in the blue shirt? No, it is not. Found in the secret underground chamber, the Da Vinci Code intensifies. Right? The 7 stars arrayed in a breathing pattern. I've been to a lot of the places where the Da Vinci Code happens. Maybe that would be an interesting viewer request stream, is like just photos of Da Vinci Code places. So he's promoting the building of churches, but he's also putting Christians in the government. So one of the things that had been going on in Roman world was persecution again, right? And we talked about Roman imperial persecution, but this is also something that was happening on like regional levels. So like regional governors had localized persecutions of Christianity. And we know that this was a problem inside of the Roman world because we actually have quite a few letters from governors sending letters to emperors going, how do I deal with Christians in my territory? Some of the most famous ones were sent to the Emperor Trajan in the 120s. And like, how do I deal with these people? Like, they don't sacrifice and they won't do the good stuff. So how do I even handle this? And Trajan's like, kill them or whatever. Just keep the peace, man. Just make sure that the taxes keep flowing. Christians in the government, I bet that'll go well. Yeah, so Constantine is putting Christians in the government. And this is a big, big deal because when you put people in a position where that position had just been actively persecuting them, this is going to create a dramatic shift in culture and legal status, right? This is happening very, very fast. So after Constantine, every emperor except for one is going to be a Christian. So all of Constantine's children are going to be Christians, and all of the emperors except for this guy that ends up being his nephew, this guy named Julian the Apostate, who we'll talk about next week, are going to be Christians. And by the time we get to 380, we have this guy. This guy is the Emperor Theodosius. He is going to do something even bigger than Constantine. So Constantine passed the Edict of Milan in 313 that said Christianity was legal. In 380, Theodosius is going to pass the Edict of Thessalonica that says Christianity is the official Roman religion. And he also basically bans money going from the official treasury to Roman, like traditional Roman temples. And he's going to basically start spending all of the money that would have gone to these Roman temples to the church. Dear Theodosius, right? So this is a big deal. Like, imagine today if the oil companies in America lost all of the federal subsidies and the government in America decided to give all of the oil subsidies to solar-powered companies that were going to make solar power. How fast would our energy situation in America change, right? If the government props that held up this system were yanked away and given to this sort of upstart thing, how much chaos would that cause in our country? I mean, it's a good idea, but for real, this would be some pretty big mess. There'd be a lot of chaos going around. This is a really unpopular decision in a lot of areas because even though the emperors are Christian and a lot of the military is Christian and some of the, even like the, you know, the governors are Christians, the vast majority of people in Rome as an empire are still either on the fence about this or just openly not Christians. They're still practicing the old Roman polytheistic situation, you know, the old polytheistic religion. And this is especially going to be true in rural areas. And this is where we need to talk about an interesting word. This word paganus. If God wanted us to live on solar energy, he would have put a giant nuclear reactor in the sky. Vipers, interesting that you say that. So a paganus is actually the Latin word for rural farmer. And if you were a rural farmer in the Roman world, you were a paganus. And if you want to sort of shorten that to pagan, now you know where we get our word pagan from. And pagan, in its most original use, just meant rural, out in the middle of nowhere, right? The hoi polloi, correct. And the reason that this became synonymous with non-Christian is that the cities Christianized fastest and the rural areas Christianized slowest. But the change had happened, right? The light switch had been flipped in the span of fewer than 100 years. Again, fewer than 100 years. We're talking from 313 to 380. That's 67 years. Rome went from being under the biggest Christian persecution that it had ever had to being officially Christian. It's befuddling. It's one of the weirdest things that has ever happened in history. So they're kind of like Roman hillbillies, but they don't all live up in the hills. So this is amazing, and it is really, really bizarre. This is not something that people expected to happen. It's not something that you would have bet on, right? You would not have gotten good odds on this, right? Nobody would have thought that this was going to be the thing. So the world here has changed almost 180 degrees. Once the change happened, do you reckon Christianity became a trend thing among upper classes? Yes, it did, Metrand, especially when the emperor converted. So let's talk a little bit about how important the emperor is, right? So going all the way back to Julius Caesar, who wasn't an emperor, but he was a dictator, this idea that the leader of Rome could be a deified figure was very, very prevalent. right? So Julius Caesar became deified and was worshipped as a god. Augustus was deified and worshipped as a god. Most of the early Roman emperors were deified and worshipped as gods. So while they were alive, they held the title Pontifex Maximus. They were the leaders of the religion. And a lot of people looked to them for religious leadership. So when Constantine and all of the other emperors after him, except for Julian, decide that Christianity is the way, this is a huge moment because this is changing everything. Now the Roman government is saying, not only do we like this, but this is actually the official way of doing things. It's kind of like, it's this sort of cult of personality that's been crafted to be around the emperor already. And when it gets Christianity injected into it, you get this weird mix of church leader and persecutor of the bad guys. Because here's what happens after the Edict of Thessalonica in 380. Christians start persecuting the rural polytheists in the exact same way that those polytheists had persecuted Christianity. So from the span of time from about, like the 380s up until about the 500s or so, there were active pagan roundups. And the polytheistic religion of Europe didn't even go away even then. So if you were with us when we were talking about the Second Crusade, which is happening around 1100, so this is like 700 years later, one of the things that happens in the Second Crusade is that over in Poland, basically sort of this region up here, the Holy Roman Empire goes, we'd like to go kill all of the pagans that are still hanging around here. Can you lump us in with the crusade? And this gets referred to as the Windish Crusade. They were still targeting pagans in Europe, and that's 700 years later. So even though the leadership changed and most of the people that were in the upper level of society changed, there were still pockets of what we might call paganism. I'd prefer to call it traditional Roman religion, because pagan has taken on so much of a negative connotation now. So there are still pockets of these traditional polytheistic religions in Europe for the next 1,000+ years. There are these excoriating sermons that have been given by popes for hundreds of years that are talking about people needing to get rid of these old polytheistic ideas. Rough for a farmer who really just interested in their farm. Suddenly this paradigm shift in religion, and suddenly you become the bad guy. Exactly. That's kind of what we're talking about. I've used all these different terms like sea change, 180. It's a big deal. And it really does turn the world upside down. So now it's time to put the adventure hat back on for about the 5th or 6th time. Pagans party harder. E-I-E-I-O was a pagan chant. Old Nick Pagan had a farm. And on that farm... Okay. So, if you'll remember, earlier in the stream, I showed you this Mithraeum, right? This was at Dolichae. We have our cave here. We have our Mithraeum where we were doing sacrifices to Mithras. Well, let me show you that same cave just a little bit later, because in that same cave, we have a break screen. No, we have this. This would have been a nook where they had a statue of Mithras. And if we zoom in, what do we see carved into the wall here? Well, by golly, we see a cross carved into the wall. And we see where the statue has been chipped out and carved out so that the Mithraeum gets blessed. And this gets turned into a place of Christian prayer. Because when Christianity takes over, they start pushing out all of these other religions. And you go, okay, so that's one example. Okay, whatever. So again, this is at Dolichae. He got quite cross. I appreciate that. Let's look at this guy. So this is at a place called Caesarea, and it was originally a really big temple to Zeus. And I do mean a really, really big temple. But you go, wait a second, what did they do to the columns here? Well, they replaced some of this and plastered over the columns. Now, why would they do that? And what is this lintel piece that they've crammed in between the columns? And what's up with this little doorway? And they've added some stuff back here. That looks odd. What's going on? Well, if we look at this from another angle, this is now a Christian church. This particular location, somewhere around 450 of the current era. So this is actually a little bit after what we're talking about, but I think it's an appropriate place to show the photos. The Christians took over this old temple to Zeus, built an apse, which is sort of like the altar place, put in some chancel screens and some rows, and they turned this temple to Zeus into a Christian church. I can show you dozens of examples across the ancient world. Extreme Makeover Temple Edition. Right? This happened all over the ancient world. If you know that one of the words that we use to describe big churches today is basilica. The word basilica was originally a Roman word for courthouse, basically where they would have legal arguments. And the style of a basilica is because Christians took over a lot of these old Roman buildings. Looks like the house you just bought. Here for hints on renovating. Jesus, yeah. Well, Jesus is an anglicized version of the Greek name. The Hebrew name that he would have been called is actually a lot closer to Yeshua, which is where we would get our English name Joshua. So it's a lot further from Zeus to Yeshua. Yeah, so there we go. JMR's with us. Also, hey, Meg, good to see you. Maybe it was originally built for Jesus, but the Greeks converted it to Zeus. Hey, Tuna. Joshi Poo. So Christianity began to literally and physically take over the old Roman polytheistic religion. And this is a truly remarkable moment in history because Christianity went from being what was probably less than 10% of the Roman population to being like 80 or 90% of the Roman population in just this really, really short period of time. Imagine if, a hypothetical situation, imagine if your parents were born like your parents were, right? And by the time you're dead, your world has completely changed from one religion to another. So if the dominant religion right now in America, I know that not everybody is a Christian, but the biggest religious group inside of America right now is Christian, and probably the closest analog that we could find is maybe Buddhists. Buddhists might be around the same percentage of people in America that Christians were in Rome. Imagine that by the end of your life, Buddhism becomes the dominant religion in America. How crazy would that change the culture? How rapidly would we see things shifting in our world? Christianity inserting itself on other stuff. Never heard that one before. It happens a lot. All right, but there we go. Okie doke. So that actually brings me to the end of my portion of the stuff that I wanted to talk about tonight. We've had a lot of great questions, and I do want to make sure that before we end up going out on a raid, I give everybody an option to ask some more questions if you have them. So if you've got those lovely questions, please do throw them in. I'm going to go look at where we're supposed to be rating. Because again, we are on we're participating in a charity drive right now that is called the 12 Days of Streaming. One more time for everybody that might be just coming in. We are collecting donations toward the Starlight Children's Foundation, which tries to help kids that are in the hospital have a little bit more fun by giving them games, video games, card games, board games, etc. We are actually $30 further on our goal, so we're actually at $155, almost to our goal of $200. Let me catch up. But how does this prove that the patriarchy is responsible for global warming? I'm not sure, Tuna. I don't know if that's meant to be a joke, perhaps. Monotheism allowing greater unity of purpose, giving a political power advantage over more divided polytheistic beliefs, making dominance easier to achieve. Thoughts? Dun dun dun. Dun, 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 dun. Tenebrous, thank you so much for the follow, and welcome to the adventure. Magnificent. That is actually one of the prevailing theories about why Christianity was so successful in doing so. The fact that it sort of unified everybody's angle towards the actual Pope itself, and I'm sorry, towards the Emperor himself being sort of a combined political and religious figure. That is definitely an argument that can be made. I feel, though, like that has a bit of an opportunity, if we are going to argue that, to eliminate genuine religious belief from the equation. I think that it is very important for us to understand that ancient people had legitimate religious beliefs, and that was a legitimate motivator for their life. And you can accommodate that in the theory that monotheism was so successful because it allowed for this. But a lot of people that argue that monotheism was successful because of the particular scenario that you suggest do so in a agnostic or atheistic way. And a lot of those people have a sort of negative opinion about actual historical religious belief. The thought literally just occurred to me when you mentioned polytheism. Meg, you've actually stumbled across a really well-documented theory in history that has a lot of people that have really fancy letters after their name that have published a lot of stuff. So if that was a ex nihilo idea that you just popped up in your head, that's a great one, because there are a lot of scholars that agree with you. It's related to an article you shared on Discord. I must have... Oh, wait. Was this one of these... Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember that now. I have blocked it out of my memory because it was so bonkers. Not that you posted it, that the idea itself. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's so many bonkers articles this week. During the shift to Christianity, what happened to the Jewish community in the Roman Empire? The Jewish community had legal protection under the Roman Empire. So technically the Jewish people were listed as a protected religious minority. So the Romans could not make laws that directly targeted them. That doesn't mean that they liked them. They would have fallen under the rule that Decius made, where everybody had to sacrifice. I would suspect that a lot of them tried to argue laws that were made under Julius Caesar as a way to get out of doing that sacrifice. Some of them probably were able to get out from under it, but a lot of them weren't. When Christianity began to take over the dominant religion, that is going to start causing a lot of tension. The relationship between early Christians and Jewish people at that time was already very tenuous. It did not have a lot of warm and fuzzies between them, and that unfortunately gets worse as time goes on. The Roman governors and emperors themselves don't necessarily target Jewish people with laws, but there is a massive cultural stigma that begins to develop against them. that already existed to a certain extent under the polytheistic religion of Rome, but under the Christian religion of Rome, the Jewish people are going to get an even further kind of negative view. They didn't really suffer active open persecution, but a lot of that is because the Jewish people at that time did not actively try to convert people to Judaism. If you wanted to convert to Judaism, you sort of had to approach them. They did not come approach you. And that's one of the ways that they were able to kind of scoot around and keep their populations about the same. So, it makes sense. Less potential combination of emphasis. Growing up in the Reformed Protestant Church, you were told that the point at which the early church became Roman Catholic Church and apostate was in the 400s, was when the Pope declared himself the spiritual successor of Peter. When does the academic world believe that the birth of the Roman Catholic Church occurred? That's a long and okay. So the Petrine theory. This is the idea that the Pope is the Bishop of Rome, and it is special because Peter was the disciple that God said was the basis of the church. That had been around for a long time. And even before that really got a lot of ground outside of the patriarchal world. There was this idea of apostolic succession, which was happening even in the sort of the first century Christian expansion. You can see this pop up sometime in Scripture where it's talking about, like people were arguing about who baptized them. Like, oh, I'm baptized by Paul, so I'm better than you. You're baptized by Onesimus, who's baptized by Paul. So you're like, you're not even as cool as I am because I got the good stuff. So this concept of apostolic succession was one that seems to have been at least originally introduced even before the real concept of Petrine theory got fully developed. But when does the Roman Catholic Church officially begin? That's going to be a big loaded question. And there are multiple dates considered. There is stuff like as late as the Great Schism that happens in the 1050s, where the East and the West basically excommunicate each other. There's stuff that stretches back before that. The easy answer is that most historical figures, or most historians, are not really going to put as much weight on the early 400s, or basically at the end of the Western Roman Empire. They're not going to put as much emphasis on that as the Reformed Church does. The Reformed Church comes at that in an angle of basically trying to devalue or delegitimize the effect of the Roman Catholic Church throughout the medieval period. And I'm not trying to say that as a slight against the Reformed Church, but that's their purpose in stating so. They believe that the decisions made, especially after Rome collapsed, when the Pope became the sort of standard centralized form of authority in the western part of the empire, as the establishment of some different theological line. But that line stretches back further and continues on through. The Petrine theory and the argument was around even around the time of Nicaea. The Bishop of Rome did not deign to go to Nicaea, but sent representatives because that was something that the Eastern Church had to deal with. There wasn't heresy in the West, according to him, so there was already tension, or at least opinion, even as far back as Nicaea, that there was just something special about Rome. And even before then, if you read the Church Father documentation of arguments over what stuff works and what stuff doesn't, and what is kosher and what isn't kosher, the bishops of Rome are already growing very dissatisfied with the East because they're super cosmopolitan and they have all these weird ideas, and all the heresies come out of there and then get over into his part of the world and goof everything up in the West. You don't see heresy starting in the West. They all start in the East. So even like in the 100s or early 200s, there are already bishops of Rome that are saying stuff that seem to imply that they already think that they're just a little bit special and different. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to put a finger on. And I know I just spat out a whole bunch of data that doesn't necessarily seem to line up in a single narrative. The too long didn't read is it varies depending on which group of people are doing the answering. Some historians say that it was the Great Schism that separates the East from the West. Some say that there's not really a division before that. Some say that Petrine theory is just an outgrowth of apostolic succession. Some say that there were people that were like, the Roman bishops already thought that they were a big deal going all the way back to like the 100s. So the decisions in the 400s were just sort of solidifying ideas that had already existed. Okay, you tend to see religion as political movements, so you guess you learned that way anyway. That makes sense. The religious movements of the ancient world and political movements of the ancient world are very closely united, and that hasn't really changed over the course of time. You're happy for me to have blocked that article out? Not a question. You just want to say, I'm a fantastic teacher. You're never really interested in history, but you assemble the puzzle pieces together in such a compelling way that you look forward to my streams. And the factoids, you'll be able to burst out in parties and make yourself look smart. Vipers, thank you. That really does mean a lot. I want to do exactly that. I hate the fact that history is typically seen as a kind of a boring thing. I don't like the fact that history is the first thing that gets tossed out the window when you need to take a field trip or having a meeting. I don't like the fact that there are way too many teachers just in general that aren't motivated to teach the stuff in a way that's learnable and easy to appreciate and understand. So I really do appreciate that, Vipers. Thanks a lot. That's why I'm here. That is literally why I stream the way that I stream. Also, Rosefairy, please remember that I was not trying to make a personal statement of what I believe about any particular religious ideology, and I was absolutely not trying to say anything that would be targeted towards your particular religious beliefs in a negative way at all. I was trying to be kind of just factually across the board. I think everybody is amazing. And if you wanted to talk about that, I'd be happy to explore that on a personal level off stream. I try to stay in as middle of the road as I can here. Undermining my power, burn them. As a newcomer, you're really happy as well. The stream has been exciting and interesting. Thank you. Well, thank you, Crunchy Fox. I'm glad that you came in, and I'm glad that you are having a good time. Other questions, because we can still have some more if you got them. Okie dokie. Let me see. Actually, now you do have a question. How do viewer requests work? Okay, so there are two ways. First way, on viewer request night, after we get done with a viewer request, I will ask for suggestions, and I will usually take 4 ideas. The first one is the one that came in second on the last poll. So basically, like number 2 gets carried over into the next one, and then I'll take 3 new ones. And they just come from whatever the chat puts in. And then we'll have a poll, and everybody in the chat gets to vote. So everybody in chat gets to vote, and then whatever they vote on, boom, that's the topic. But there is a special way that you can choose your own adventure. So if you've ever had one of those old choose your own adventure books, that's where it comes from. So if you are 10,000 points in the bag right now, you can redeem a special choose your own adventure redemption. You probably can't see it right now because I don't always have it turned on. Usually before we do a poll, I will ask. So on viewer request nights, I'll say, hey, does anybody want to redeem a stream? So at that point, you could say, yeah, I'd like to redeem a stream, and I'll turn it on. You can redeem it for your 10K points, and then you get to name it. As a note, if you name your stream directly, I do reserve the right to work with you to tweak it a little bit, especially if it's something that I don't know if I'll be able to make a full stream out of, or if the topic is just way too big to fit into one stream. We might try to narrow it down. So like if you said, I want to do the history of swords, that's way too big, right? We need to kind of narrow that down. Or I want to do the history of Russia. That's way too big. Give me a time period, right? So you can redeem your points, or we can do a vote. Our next viewer request stream is on the history of the Federal Reserve, which is going to probably be done next Tuesday. I don't necessarily like to stream a full month versus a full month's full of Tuesday and Thursday streams. We usually only do viewer request every other Tuesday, but I am taking the entire week of Christmas off, and I might even take the next week off too. So I feel like we should probably get that one out of the way because we've already had it voted on. How do I know so much stuff? Tropical Geek, this is my job. I study all of this stuff. I will say that I know that I have been lucky enough to have a very full retention sort of thing. I retain a lot of the information that I get. I don't have some sort of like perfect recollection or anything like that. I'm not trying to be some sort of like eidetic memory. But stuff sticks in my head pretty easily. And that is sometimes a curse and sometimes a blessing. When it comes to learning stuff, I pick stuff up really fast. I have a pretty quick brain, and I can cram a lot of stuff up there and it sticks. So, but I'm sure that there are tons of things that you know that I don't. I mean, I'm a history guy, a sociology guy, and you know the social sciences are my bag. But I mean, I don't have the periodic table memorized. I know like hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, oxygen. Okay, so I know a little bit of it, but I don't know all of it, right? Okay, moving along. Dead marshes. So we're switching back to Tolkien. What are they and why were they dangerous? So the dead marshes are just north of the Black Gate, which is called Morannon. And they're frequently referred to as the Deadlands. And that was the site of the battle between the last alliance where Isildur and Elendil teamed up with Gil-galad, the last of the Elven kings, and fought Sauron at the gates of Mordor and chopped his finger off. And the reason that they're so deadly is that the area itself was so inundated with dead people and orcs and blood that it just turned into this giant swampy thing. They used to be these big fields where the female versions of Ents had these big hollows and these sort of nicely tilled gardens and these little streams running through them. But with all of the death, they basically got tramped over and mushed. And the reason they're so deadly is that there's a whole bunch of ghosts and crap that still live there because of all of the horrible death. So there you go, Tuna. Roger that. You're not up at all. I'm not at all surprised that things don't line up as you say. The church is long due to examine its headcanon and traditions regarding history. Absolutely. And I think that it is a good thing to have honest and open conversations about church history, especially amongst people that are taking this stuff very seriously. And I think that one of the reasons that a lot of people in America are finding Christianity less palatable recently is because of a lot of the scandal stuff that's coming up and the fact that there aren't being conversations about how this stuff has happened in the past and how things can be explored and historically explained. Any religion can turn into sort of a spoon-feeding situation. If you're going to, and again, I'm not saying what my personal religious beliefs are. You could probably guess a little bit, but if you're going to base your entire existence around a certain set of beliefs, you kind of need to know where they came from and what they are. It's probably just better for you that way. Hey, you're at 9.5K, so you could do that soon. All right, Master Ant, let's start percolating. Start thinking of some ideas. You found your entry quite interesting and made you want to learn more. Restorator, you are welcome to join the Discord. or you can just find me on Discord. I would be happy to answer questions if you wanted to shoot me stuff in DMs. It might be actually a little bit easier to kind of go through this stuff line by line if you wanted to. I'd be happy to talk. And that's the same for anybody. If you ever have historical questions, you go throw them in the Discord. I'll do my best to answer them as straightforward as possible. You're on 13.2K, and you know what you're going to vote for. Vipers, I must have missed that. I don't know what you're going to vote for. What's my favorite subject to talk about? History? Are you talking about like a specific type of history? Probably Roman history. Are you throwing any Kubrick theory into the history of the Federal Reserve? Tuna, I might just try that just for you. Just kidding you, but you adore how much I know. You're interested in African slave routes. I could totally do a history on slave routes. And one thing that I would find really interesting to cover is not just the African slave routes that ran through the Atlantic, but the much bigger ones and much more established ones that ran through the Indian Ocean, because slave routes had run through Africa for probably about 800 years before the Atlantic slave route even opened up, especially with things like the Muslim slave trade that was running around in southeastern Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman region, the eastern coast of Africa, and India. That's a really big chunk of stuff out there that was stuff that people just don't talk about. All right, Rocket, good to see you. Thanks for hanging out. I'm glad you had a good one. Okay. All right. I think that it's actually time for us to go raid. I say that mostly because my throat is starting to get a little scratchy. And I don't necessarily want to talk myself hoarse. So let's go schedule our raid. And we're going to go, I have been instructed. One last call, though. I will say one last call. If you are so inclined and are able to, this is the last night of our charity drive to get some charity for Starlight Children's Foundation. I've been talking about Christianity too much. So if you are able to, you can click that link there. Otherwise, thank you all for hanging out. We're going to go raid. We're going to raid Mini Nerds Nerding. Mini Nerds Nerding is currently doing some Warhammer 4K miniature painting.
Head to rumbleverse.com to sign up.
I don't want to go to Rumbleverse.
World gameplay.
Go away. All right, so we are going to hit this raid button. Thanks for the stream. You're always happy when you make it here. Yeah, thank you. Leaning towards picking antique Greece Rome as the specialization for your bachelor's degree, so you'll be ready for that question. Oh yeah, I know lots of stuff about that world. I could talk about that a lot. Probably more than you actually want me to. All right. Greco-Roman world is a class that I have taught, so I could hit you with that. All right, so we are going to go raid Mini Nerds Nerding. When we get to Mini Nerds Nerding, our battle cry is adventure with lots of exclamation points. And then if you have them, you can share those lovely, lovely adventure hat emotes. Thank you all so very much for hanging out. Really great stream tonight. Lots of interaction, lots of good questions. This makes my heart warm and fuzzy. Thank you all so much. You all are awesome people. Show some love to Mini Nerds Nerding. The next time you'll definitely see me is, well, probably Tuesday. I'm probably going to do a month's worth of viewer request streams just to get it out of the way. So probably Tuesday, doing a Federal Reserve stream, and then Thursday next week. But then I'm taking some time off for the holidays. So anyway, thank you all so very much. I'll see you next time. Take it easy.